We'd go to a village and say, okay, what do you need? We need clean water. Okay. And they'll say, well, 12 years ago, an organisation came and they drilled a borehole and they gave us a hand pump. Great, where is it? And they'll say, well, it was great. It worked for a month or a year or 2 years and then it stopped working.
Hello there and welcome to the Difference podcast. This is the podcast that we'll be talking about everything tech related, businesses, entrepreneurship, people that are hustling, the game changers and the change makers, people that are out there at the forefront trying to change the world in different ways. This episode we get to talk to Phil Hepworth from Water for Africa. In 2010, after Phil had a life-changing moment, this led him to install and maintain new water projects in remote communities, providing fresh drinking water to the 46 million people in Tanzania who go without. And since its beginnings, Water for Africa has provided over 2.2 million people with clean water. Welcome, Phil Hepworth. Before you started Water for Africa, how often were you flying outside of Australia?
No, I never really particularly left Australia. We weren't flying anywhere, and I knew nothing about Africa, really. I've never been, so yeah, never really ventured overseas much.
So how easily now can you adjust to time differences?
I find when I go to Africa, easy. When I come back to Australia, that becomes difficult. It actually does take me a couple of days to get my head round and my body clock adjust. And it's not in a big way, but it's enough to, make you feel rather sleepy at times when you shouldn't. Yeah. And the older I get, everybody says, are you having a nana nap? A granddad nap? And I'm like, no.
So running a non-for-profit isn't easy generally, but what is it like running one in Tanzania from Perth?
It's a funny thing. I think going back years, it was probably a really difficult thing. But with technology, it does become simple. So I can talk to the staff on the ground every day simply through Messenger and WhatsApp. And I think the key is having the right staff. It's having staff that you can trust and rely on. And I'm on a 10-year friendship / journey with our manager out in Tanzania. The first trip I ever went on, I met him, and he's the most amazing guy, trustworthy, loyal, and he makes my job really, really simple, really easy. So it does become easier when you've got someone you can lean on and trust in out there.
In 2010, you learned a statistic that potentially changed your life's narrative forever. What was it, and what was your relationship with Africa prior to that knowledge?
Okay, I had no relationship with Africa. I knew nothing about water or African people, but I saw a statistic back then that one child dies every 15 seconds, and that is simply because they drink dirty water. They don't have clean water. And it was a real surreal, life-changing moment where I thought deeply and thought if that was happening in Australia, we would do something. But then my mind switched to, what if they were my children? What if my babies, when they were little boys, were dying of something ridiculous like diarrhea? What if, as my children grew up, they were dying because I couldn't give them clean water? And it actually made me get on an aeroplane and go and have a look. Wow. Which sounds a bit crazy, but it just really, really stuck with me.
That's incredible. There's a bit of a movement in the altruistic community around how people use their time and their occupation to contribute to those in need. How did you identify a need that used both your trade or your skill set?
It was simply going back to seeing the statistic, but I suppose being brave enough to get on a plane. I actually emailed, what do you do in these situations? You see a need, you think, I really want to help. In fact, you feel compelled to do something. And I think the first place everybody turns is Google. Google knows everything, right?
Yes.
Even more than my wife, which is pretty hard to believe. So obviously you Google, and I found a man who was going to Tanzania giving people clean water, and I just emailed him and said, please, can I come and join you? Let me come and see what that looks like. So that was the start.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And how would you encourage others to try and find ways to give back?
Wow, the first way of giving back is with your finances, because if you tap into the right organisations, you can change the world. And I really believe it only takes a lot of people to give a little, and we can change the world. Secondly, if you feel that you really want to go and try and change the world yourself, well, Google's a good place to start. But start talking to people around you. And generally, what we found is the resources that we needed to start were actually within our grasp. We just had to start looking.
Yeah.
And as we looked, things came up, people came up, resources came our way, which enabled us to take the next step. And it's almost like you take one step and see where that one step leads. And that's what I would say to anybody. But don't be dismayed when you come to a door that's closed. Just keep taking small steps, and things will happen.
And what was your sort of professional background? Is drilling for water something that you had experience in before you decided to fly across the world?
No, I was in irrigation. So, doing people's lawns and sprinklers and putting systems in. And, often people say, oh, was that the connection? There's absolutely no connection. So when I went out, I met a guy, I'd pleaded with him to let me come. I met him, and he was already repairing and drilling boreholes. And I just went and started to learn. So for the next 4 years, I didn't try and create my own wheel. I jumped on the bandwagon with him and said, okay, let me just come and help you.
Yeah.
Whenever you come, I'm going to come, and I just want to help. And that's what I did for 4 years.
So what did that look like, going to, was it Tanzania initially?
Yeah, it looked like going to Tanzania, juggling my business at the time in irrigation. So I'd close it down, and I'd just say to the people I work for, I've got to go to help people in Africa. And they were great. They said, we'll wait for you. We'll find someone in interim, but we will wait for you because of what you're doing, because it's not a selfish thing you're doing. You're wanting to help people, which was amazing. So I would close my business down, jump on a plane, get to Africa, jump off the plane, jump in a truck with this American guy, go fix wells. And then after my 2, 3, 4, 5 week stint, I'd get on the plane, say on a Wednesday night. I'd arrive in Perth on Thursday evening, and I'd say to Julie, have we got any work? What's going on? And on Friday, I'd be out working. So a week before coming home, she'd start sending emails. And we tried to make it work the best we could. And then the rest, you just sort of have to believe or trust, or, whatever your thing is, but you just hang on. But we found that every time we took a step, there was a door that would open.
I find it amazing that you were both able to support each other through that process. For 4 years, it was just you jumping on the plane, and then you've got family. And how did that look like for them? What did your children feel about that?
Yeah, at first it was a bit of a shock. And I remember the first time I went away, and there was a little incident, and my kids rang me in the middle of the night, and I had to reassure them, because there were, one of them had a nightmare about some ridiculous thing, and I just reassured them, and as a family we just came together, and they were okay. And then when I came back, I actually sat them all down and I said, okay guys, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's okay to answer whatever you feel, but I'm going to ask that if you would share your dad with other people. Because some people don't have a dad, some people are dying, there's all sorts of things around the world, but there's a lot of people that don't have water. So I'm asking you if you would share your dad with these people. And if you say no, it's okay, we'll make another plan. And they all sat and thought and said, okay, we're prepared, we'll share. That was a pivotal moment for me, because leaving your family, you've got to leave them knowing they're okay. You can't leave them thinking there's a problem. So, yeah.
It gave you the freedom to kind of go
They
forward.
gave me the freedom and their permission. And we actually walked this journey as a family together. It wasn't just my decision. You know, Julie was all for it. And then my 3 boys all said, yeah, okay, we're in.
And sort of, was there any kind of significant life experiences that you think might have led you down this path? Because it's not a usual thing for people to pack up a successful business and then go halfway across the world to try and do something. And perhaps not everybody feels that they're capable of doing that. So was there anything that...
There was. And it is really part of my personal story on a personal level. But we emigrated to Australia. We were here for a while, and it's a funny thing. Everything I did seemed to not work, and I got really depressed. And I used to think about depression. I'd think, oh, come on, just get a grip. It's not that bad. And then I find myself depressed, and I find myself. It felt like I'm in a dry well, sat at the bottom, looking up at daylight, but I can't climb out. Okay, I've got this ever increasing spiral of darkness where I can't lift my mind out, and that's how I would describe it. And for me, one day, I'd seen a church. I walked in and I just sat and cried, and I said, God, you've got to help me. And when I got up and left the church, I've never had depression again. And that was the catalyst that started me looking at life differently. Going, okay, what's life about? What's my life about? What can I contribute to society? Is it about he who has the most toys at the end of his life wins? Is that really what life's about? And that is the catalyst that made me start really soul searching, that made me see a statistic that 1 child was dying every 15 seconds. So for me, it was a very personal thing, and for me, it has been a faith journey. But that is what really was the catalyst to it all, really, yeah.
Yeah. Well, some people find it difficult to come out of depression because it's quite inward looking, isn't it? And then to use that position to help others, that's really incredible. But what would you say to people out there that feel like they perhaps can't do that much with their skills, or they don't have enough finances to kind of go and fund projects like this? What would you say to them?
The skill set I had was putting sprinklers in someone's lawn and making the garden look green and beautiful. My skill set did not stretch to helping people in a foreign country with water. And I didn't have enough money. Every time, people call it what you want, call it faith, call it, people would say it's destiny. But every time we came to a situation where we needed money, we would step out first. And then the money would come. Really, the money would come in ways that I've never even considered. And that doesn't mean we sat back and never did anything. We were always trying, we were always pushing, we were always trying to go forward and help more people. But the truth is, it can't ever just be me. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than one person. So we have so many people that do support so far, and we're eternally grateful to those people. But yeah, I don't believe I ever had what is needed to complete this, apart from the fact that I said yes and tried. So I think to step out is the key.
Yeah, so stepping out is one of the first steps. Saying yes.
Saying yes. I remember I used to meet with a men's group, and we'd all get together and watch videos and different things. And, I remember going and saying, guys, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to Africa to give people clean water. And they all went, whoop, whoop. But when I spoke it out, it changed everything. I spoke it out to these guys, mentors and people I was walking a journey with. And by speaking it out, now I've set something in motion. And that was quite a moment in time where it changed things from thinking about it to now I've spoken it out. I've got to actually go and do something about this.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know. So when you articulate it to others, it gives them that ability to be inspired to rally you on, and then it's an encouraging thing for everyone involved, isn't it? A lot of people find in the charity world that people nowadays are kind of getting overwhelmed by a lot of images in the media of things going on in the world from Africa or, natural disasters. I mean, we recently had the bushfires, but there's a term that's called compassion fatigue, where people feel like they almost have to shut themselves off from a lot of the marketing that charities who are doing really legitimate, great work out there, but they're not able to kind of sell, or for lack of a better word, their message to people because there's a lot of indifference. What was different about you that inspired you to action rather than indifference?
I think because of the turning point in my life, pushed me on to go and have a look. When I peered over the wall and saw what was going on, it was very hard to say no. So I think two short stories probably answer that. We were out in a remote village, very remote, and we just repaired a well, and the buckets were lining up. And there were literally hundreds of buckets, and all the mamas had come in, and they're all jabbering away in their tongue, and they're all excited, and there's this electricity in the air. And I'm just stood back after fixing, I'm just looking at what's going on. And it was dusk, and there was this orange glow, like when you look out of the ocean in Perth and everything goes orange, and it's just, you look and go, wow, this is incredible. And it was like that, but it was inland. And as I looked at this sunset, and it was really hazy, I could see something in the distance. And it was like something was coming off the ground. And I'm watching, and I'm not quite realising what it is. And this figure got closer and closer, and I realised it was a mama. And she had a bucket in one hand, and she had a baby strapped on her back, and she was running as fast as she could because she'd heard the water was now working, the water was clean. And she wanted to get her spot in the queue because everybody's bucket goes down and everybody knows whose bucket is. But it was that moment where I looked and saw how fast she was running and what it meant, and thought, that is why I do this. That is the essence of what I'm doing. And the other story was we were out repairing a well in a Maasai district. So the Maasais are these Tanzania and Kenyan, and they're almost like a warrior tribe. They're just incredible, and they wear these bright colour, almost tartan-like robes that they put around them. And to this day, they are warriors. To be a man, they historically killed a lion just with, a spear and a club and whatever. So you've got this historical tribe that is just so African. So I'm there, and there's a well, and we needed to put a concrete base down on this well. So to do that, we needed to collect some water. So they took us down across the road with our truck, and there was like a pond. It's not running water, it's just still water, and it's like this big pond. A bit like Lake Monger or something like that in Perth, It's not going anywhere, it's just stagnant and sitting there. So we go, and we're collecting water into a big container on the back of the vehicle to mix this concrete. And you can see clearly it's dirty water, which is fine. We're mixing concrete. Does it make any difference? No, it doesn't. Now, as I'm stood and we're collecting the water, I look over the other side of this pond, and the herd of cattle and sheep had come down to drink with Maasai. Now, obviously, when cattle and sheep come and they're drinking, they defecate and urinate where they stand. That's just what they do, the cattle. Okay, so you've got contamination on a massive scale happening over there. And I'm watching this, I'm thinking, gosh, that's crazy. And I look to my left, and there's a young boy having his bath, and he's lathered up with soap, and he's in this pond having a bath. And then we carry on collecting this water, and we're filling our container. And then there's this majestic Maasai warrior stood with us who's been helping us. And he takes his bit of cloth and he puts it over the water we've just collected, and he bends down and he starts drinking the water. And that moment was so surreal. I looked and thought, well, that's why people die. Because the cow's over there are making a mess of the water, and this guy's having a bath in it, and goodness knows what else is happening in this water. But he's drinking it. How can he possibly drink it? And those are two of the little stories that really sort of open my mind to what is going on in the world.
Yeah, it is shocking, isn't it? Because I think when you come from a country like Australia or from a place as beautiful as sunny Perth, you forget that access to that water, and the number of diseases that can be passed on. So even taking a step back from that, what were these communities like prior to them getting the water? I mean, what do you know any of the statistics around some of the people that die?
I mean, today, I think the statistic has changed. One child dies every 90 seconds instead of 15 seconds. So it's getting better.
That's amazing.
We've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Because a child shouldn't die because they've got to drink dirty water. In the villages we've been in, we see outbreaks of cholera. Children die of diarrhoea. They have diarrhoea, they get dehydrated because of the diarrhoea, but the water that now they're going to rehydrate with is the very thing that gave them the diarrhoea, and you've got a cycle that happens. And ridiculous as it sounds, children die of diarrhoea. It should never happen. To us, it's an inconvenience, but to them it can be life-threatening. But some of the villages where we've gone and drilled new boreholes, before we will go and ask questions. So there was one particular village, and there was a dispensary there, which is like a doctor's surgery come little, very small medical clinic. They generally don't have much in them, with medicines, but there is someone trained to help, and they will try and help people. So we went to them and said, okay, what does it look like on a water scale? What are the problems you've got? Because we know they're walking down to a stream and collecting water. And streams are great. People think running water, it's clean. Well, it's clean if it's clean upstream. But if the people who are upstream to you are doing things to the water, then it's not clean. And there lies the problem. So we know they were going down to this dirty water source and getting water. And the nurse said to us, we see 20 plus people every week with stomach issues, ranging from something mild to really severe stomach issues because of the water. Okay, so we went back a year later and said, tell us now, what is the situation? You've had this new pump installed, people are getting the clean water rather than that. And she said, maybe we see one a month. So, that it's
That's
something
incredible.
firsthand that we saw and that we experienced. We often try to put pumps at schools. What happens is mum will say to the daughter, and it's always the girls who have to fetch water, it's never the boys.
Why is that?
It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I don't know the whys, but I know it's what happens. Mum or daughter fetches the water. So generally mum will say to the daughters, go fetch water. Now they can spend an hour, 2, 3, 4, 8 hours a day looking for water. So if we put a well at a school, now mum says, go to school. When you come home, fetch me some water. So it ensures that predominantly the girls now are getting a chance to go to school rather than going and fetching water and finding water and getting sick. But it also means now that mum, instead of thinking about water, can get on with whatever her job is. Maybe it's growing crops, but she can get on with that and do it better, or be with the family more. So it's not just water, it affects the whole of life.
And how has Water for Africa evolved from 2013 to 2020 now? What are some of the projects that you've started recently?
So dramatically, because we never intended to start a charity. I just got on a plane going, I want to help somebody. If I can help one person or one village, wow, what an amazing thing. That was my mindset back then. And it just started to grow. And as we walked, this thing started to grow. So 5 years ago, Water for Africa became a charity in Australia, and we registered. So we now can give tax-deductible receipts to people who want to donate. But what we've done since then is we will drill boreholes. give a village, you've seen on the TV a hand pump, that you've seen these things on the TV, so we'll give them a hand pump. The second thing we quickly found was that we'd go to a village and say, okay, what do you need? We need clean water. Okay, so tell us what the history is. And they'll say, well, 12 years ago an organisation came and they drilled a borehole and they gave us a hand pump. Great, where is it? It's under that tree covered in brambles and briars. And why? What happened? And they'll say, well, it was great. It worked for a month or a year or 2 years and then it stopped working. So we went back to the water source because we don't know what to do with it. And the organisations did a wonderful thing by drilling the borehole, but in a village where somebody, they grow crops, that's how they live. So they don't go out to work. They have a mud hut, which is probably 3 by 3 metres, split into two, one half for sleeping, one half for living and cooking. And the way they live is they will grow crops on their small piece of land. That's how they live. So they never have any money to contribute to fixing a well. And they certainly don't have any know-how of how to fix it and tools that you would need. So, in fact, one of the statistics shows that 50% of all water wells in Africa are broken at any one time. So it's something we saw really quick. And an hour later, this village, we're pumping clean water again.
Oh,
so what we've done is we set up a repair team. So every week, this team in our region goes around repairing wells. And what we want to do is become a sustainable model where we don't just give you water, we ensure water flows for years to come. So those are the two things with the water. We've started a seed program with widows. So we found that in the region we're in, HIV is quite big. It's quite a big thing. It's really sad. And what we find is that there will be grandmothers whose children have died and she's left with all these grandkids. And she's old, she's struggling herself. And we started a seed program where we give them a cash crop. They could never afford this, but we give them a cash crop and say, there you go. When you get your harvest, we would like you to give the seed back and we can give it to the next woman. And that has been going so amazing. We hear reports of, I've put a new roof on my house. All my grandkids are in school. I've got some money left over. We've all got full tummies and I've got my seed for next season. Yeah. So we're hearing amazing stories that women, especially, that generally these older women who are widowed, they are being empowered.
And I think that's a really important thing for people that are sceptical about charity and giving handouts to people, is knowing what is the sustainability of that project beyond an initial kind of investment. And what you've been able to do is really incredible in that you're helping teach people how to maintain these wells, but also giving them viable other sources of income, which can, really be life-changing for their families. How important has it been with your wife, Julie, who couldn't be with us today, but how important is it for her to be involved with the project?
I couldn't do it without Julie, really. It's funny, I was thinking about this today, about being married and having a wife and what that means. And honestly, without my wife, I couldn't do all that I do. I couldn't. She is the most supportive, wonderful woman. She completely gets the vision of what we're trying to do. She is every part of the decision making, that we do it together. She's often, I'm the yang, she's the yin, but she is. What she has to offer in life are so opposite to what I have, and I feel that we complement each other so well. She probably brings more to the table, but we complement each other and we seem to work well together, and I couldn't do it without her. No way.
How was the project received early on from people in Australia giving you support to the support of the volunteers in Africa?
People in Australia are amazing. They are such generous people. I would say most of our support comes from people, Joe Blogs in the street, just your average guy who's, working his job and working hard and decides, I want to be part of something bigger, of a picture that goes beyond me. And I find Australian people to be the most generous. Most generous people. They're wonderful people, and they do get behind you. I think they do, like you've been saying, they do want to know where their money's going. They do want to see it's being used correctly and spent well and is making a difference. But we also feel it's important to thank people. So we never want to take, from the person that gives $2 to somebody who gives $20,000. We actually want to take time, if we can, to thank them somehow and to let them know what is happening with their money, because I think it's really important. I think it's important that they feel valued.
And that's a big thing for me as well, like knowing that it doesn't really matter what you give when your intention is to try and change someone else's life. The big checks and the little amounts, they all have meaning and they all have purpose. So I think what you've been able to do is incredible. And how do you take those donations and how does it become a water pump, and what's the process from the donation to an installation?
From a donation to an installation, yeah. I mean, people can donate $2, for instance, which will go towards a pump or a repair or something down those lines. People can actually decide they want to fund a well themselves. Once that money hits our bank, once we have enough, we will start looking, and we won't drill one well. We will wait until we've got enough to drill a few, because that way we can get a better price from drillers. And when we're buying all the materials, if we're buying in bulk, we can buy at a cheaper rate. So we try to wait until we've got, say, 5 wells. We're going to drill 5 wells, and we can really start negotiating better prices. What I will do is I'll get my quotes. So my manager on the ground, he will go, we find the villages, we try and find the neediest villages, then we get the quotes from the driller, we do the surveys to tell us how deep we're going to drill. We talk to the villages about, well, where would you like a well? If it's practical, that's where we'd like to put it. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Once I get the quote, I generally would send 50%. We get the drilling process started, and once it's finished, we send the balance of the funds that need to be sent across. We just try and make everything manageable and bite-sized, and so nothing's ever been wasted. And then once all that has been finished, we actually go and install the hand pump. We do that ourselves. We'll have a big celebration with the village. It's great. I've got a whole chicken farm where the village will come and say, we want to give you a chicken, and I stand there sort of nervously with this chicken under my arm, looking a bit stupid because I've never held a chicken before. But we've got so many chickens now, we don't know what to do with them all.
So yeah, that's one of the projects that you guys have started, is this farm. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can, yeah. We call it the Footprint Project. The idea was, for a long time now, obviously travelling backwards and forwards from Australia to Tanzania and back, and trying to manage things, and then trying to come back, and we need to raise funds to do more work. So we've got this whole
cycle of...
this ecosystem going on that's not always the easiest thing, I find it hard asking for money. And I don't find fundraising particularly easy, but it's something we have to do. And for a long time I've thought, is there a better way? Is there an easier way? Is there an alternative way? We all talk about wanting to be fully self-sustaining, but that's a difficult thing to achieve. And it's not always a practical thing to achieve when you're wanting to give a free service to somebody. Okay, so we go to a village and we give a completely free service, and they can't actually pay us anyway. So how do you make that self-sustaining? So I thought, could we buy a cafe in Perth, run a cafe? And I'm thinking, gosh, that sounds like it'll take all my time. We'll never go do what we want to do. We will be running a cafe. And we looked at lots of different business ideas that we thought would be good. And then
as a way of funding
as a way of raising funds,
yeah.
as a way of a not-for-profit business, not as a way of us making money, a way completely.
Course.
And then one day I was talking to some expat farmers out there, and they were telling me avocado, that's the way forward, and they're all getting into this in a big way.
We love smashed avo here, don't we?
Smashed avo. Yeah, in a few years you might be eating our avocado. You never know.
Nice.
But so I all of a sudden got this thought, hey, what if we got some land? Land's pretty cheap out there, right? And number one, we can give some wages to guys to farm the land for us. But what if we grow a cash crop like avocado, which is very lucrative? So I started looking round, and I found 2 farms. One of them was actually growing macadamia nuts already. It had about 6 acres on there. And I looked and thought, okay, macadamia nuts, avocado, what if we do a bit of each? What if we diversify in case one of the products isn't doing as well? What about this farm? And it didn't take long. We had the money for the farm. It came so quickly because we put the vision out there. We said, listen, this is what we're going to do to all people that support us and everybody who's looking at what we're doing. And we said, we need to raise these funds. And it was no time at all. We had the money and we bought the farm. And we have planted 20 acres, 10 macadamia, 10 avocado so far.
Wow.
And then when I go this time, I need to really start the next 20 acres. So we need to clear the land, plant. Of course, I put the irrigation in, which is where I come in, you see.
Nice.
Yeah, that was really, it was nice for me to do that. And we've got this amazing farm in Tanzania. And it's set up as a not-for-profit business. So it is a long-term project. When you put an avocado plant in the ground, you're not really going to get anything as a return for maybe 4 or 5 years.
Wow,
that's the reality.
That's a very long game,
It's
isn't
a long
it?
game, but in 5 years' time, it should give a really good return. And all those funds will go back into funding, putting wells in, repairing wells, and all these projects that we have on the go. So it's an exciting project. It is sort of a long-term project, but nothing comes without a fight, right?
Absolutely.
You know, in life, life's not a straight line. I mean, the older I get, the more I realise life's just not a straight line. So go with it.
And coming to that, what do you think are some of the biggest roadblocks that you probably had? Because at the moment, it's sounding like things are pretty rosy. You had an idea, put it out there, went to Africa, supportive wife. But what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you manage to overcome them?
Wow, yeah. The challenges, the challenges of funds coming in and it being up and down is a challenge. One of the things that we have done is sort of put out there, if people want to get involved, why not donate X amount of dollars per week? Because we need to try to plan and we need to try and smooth out this income stream so we can really go forward with that in a way where we can actually plan and have a grip on it. The other thing we did have, there was a guy out there helping us in Tanzania. He was a Tanzanian. He was actually a member of parliament out there, and when we first started going, we were helping in his region, and as we've expanded, we're going into other political regions, and he didn't like that, and he actually wanted to try and take everything. So we had a fight there in our hands, but I'm not a person to back down, really. You know, if I think something's worth fighting for, I'll fight. So it's all over now. It's all good. We've got resolution, but I do think there will always be obstacles. I think whenever you try and do something good, there will always be an obstacle. But I do think it builds your character. It builds something in you, and nothing good will ever come without a fight. There's always going to be a fight somewhere, but it depends how you're going to take that fight.
How did being involved with giving early on sort of transform your personal life, or what other changes were going on for you at that time?
Personally?
Yeah.
Gosh, you know what? One thing it's a funny thing because for me it is a bit of a faith step. So you do these things. I remember the first aeroplane ticket I bought, and it was all the money I had, and me and Julie sat and chatted over it, and being the amazing wife, she just said, just go do it, let's see what happens. And I remember her excitedly ringing me up a couple of days later saying, you'll never guess what, there's been some money gone in our account. And I sort of nervously said, don't touch it, it's a mistake, we're going to have to pay it back. And it turned out it was, you get child payments when you've got children, and we hadn't been paid for it, and we were owed it. And these kind of things have happened all the way. There was one particular time when I was doing irrigation for a lady. Her and her husband were builders. So they'd built 3 units, and they wanted me to put the irrigation in round and all these things. And I'm chatting away as I do, and I just said, I need to finish your job because next week I'm going to Africa. And she quizzed me, why are you going to Africa? What are you doing? So I told her all the stories. So a month before my next trip, I'm sat and I know I've got to go, and I've got no money, and I want to contribute when we get there to all these things, and I've got no money, and I'm going, what do I do with this? How does this work? And out of the blue, she rang me up and said, would you come? Would you come to our house for dinner? And I'm thinking, dinner? I barely know you, And my first thought was, has the retic blown up, I'm in trouble type thing. So I went, I made Julie come with me. I said, it's dinner, it's an invitation. You've got to come because I need your support, And this beautiful couple sat and we had this lovely meal, and then they asked me all about Africa. And then her husband had a tear in his eye, and he just said, I would love to go and do that. He says, but I'm getting older and I've got all these responsibilities. He says, I'll never be able to go. If I give you this cheque, will you go for me? I said, sure, okay. So he handed me the cheque, and it was for $10,000.
Wow.
And at that point, I had no way of going and being part and contributing and bringing what I had to the table. And things like that have happened that have been completely mind-blowing and amazing. And yeah. I've got a lot of stories.
I love those stories. Is some of that in your book? Can you tell us about why you decided to write a book?
It is. And my book it's a bit of a biography to a degree about my life story, how I got to going to do Water for Africa, and the parts in my life that were turning parts, like being depressed, and it is a faith journey. My book is a faith journey, really, but it's about what I would call the miracles that have happened, like I've just talked about, to enable me to go and do this. So these, some people would say it's a coincidence. Because of my disposition, I would say that is a higher power working on my behalf to help people. So that is why I wrote the book. And it's funny, I've just started writing a second book, which will be all the stories of out there. There's so many amazing stories about things that have happened.
Oh, I can't wait to read it.
I find it fascinating when I'm reliving them by writing them.
You were talking a little bit earlier about one of those life-changing moments for you, which was seeing that woman running with her baby and the water, running towards the water. So can you tell us a little bit about Mercy Hands and what sort of stimulated you to start that?
Sure, yeah. My wife has I think most women do have a more compassionate heart than men. I think it's just a general thing, and it's not for everybody, but I think from what I see, and my wife and her friends have really compassionate hearts. So when we go in these villages and we're giving people clean water, we see needs. I mean, the needs are everywhere, and we actually thought we'd seen all the needs that were there. So we have a friend. She's a nurse. She's a retired nurse. She's a lovely lady, and she lives in Tasmania. And she one day said, can I come out with you, and could we go into villages and help people? So we said, sure, okay, let's see what that looks like. So she came, and we invited a few other nurses, doctors from Perth, and said, if you want to come, this is what we're going to do. We're going in the villages. And that was really the birth of something now they call Mercy Hands. So last year, we brought nurses and doctors and midwives from Perth, and they worked in the local hospital, which was the first time. And it's a funny story how that came about. We got asked to give the hospital clean water. So they said, could you come and help us with clean water? We said, sure, what's the problem? We thought you had water. And they were getting water pumped in a pipe to the hospital, but at any point in that time it could turn off. And then the doctor says, we've got 24 hours reserve in tanks, and then we have to close down operating theatre, we have to close down maternity ward. I mean, imagine telling that to a pregnant lady who's gone into labour. And he said, but even then the water that we're getting is really dirty, it's contaminated, and we're in all sorts of trouble because we don't know when it's going to turn off, but when it does, we don't know when it's going to come back on either. So we went out there, we looked, we drilled a borehole, we put an electric pump and a big water tower, and it's on an automatic float switch, so this thing continuously fills itself up. What we then did was we led a pipe across and fed it into the main feed for the hospital. And they turned off the dirty water supply, and it now feeds the whole hospital. So at this point, the doctor's saying, this is amazing, and my wife's saying, can we come and help in your hospital? And he's saying, of course you can. And I remember the first day we went, and we got to his office. And in a way, we gate crashed his office, and there's a lady having a consultation, but he's saying, come in. And all these nurses came in, and it's quite funny because the senior nurse I was talking about, she's retired, but she's a Christian lady, and she believes all that God's got for us. And we sat in this waiting room, and this lady sat in the middle of a consultation, and she's looking really sick. And this nurse jumped up and she said, Doctor, would you firstly ask this lady if we could pray for her? And the doctor looked at us sideways a little bit and a bit suspicious. He says, okay. So he asked her, and the lady says, yeah, sure, please pray for me, because I don't know what to do. So the nurse just prayed and asked God to heal her. And then the lady jumped up and she starts running around the office saying, I'm healed. And the doctor's looking at her going, what is going on? So from that day, the doctor's going, please just come, do anything you like. I'll help you, anything you want. So we take doctors and nurses into the hospital. And it's heartbreaking because the hospitals have got nothing. If you go to the hospital there, you've got to pay your 10,000 shillings to be seen by a doctor. Let's say you need an x-ray, it's another 10,000 shillings. If you actually need any medicine, or let's say you break an arm and you need a cast putting on, you have to go to the chemist with a list that the doctor writes and buy the cast, buy any painkillers. If you need an injection, you have to go buy the needles, you have to buy so there's nothing. Now, just for context, if you were a farm worker, you might earn on a low farm wage 5,000 shillings a day, which is about $3. So if your consultation is $6, your x-ray is $6, what you need from the chemist might be $12. At $3 a day, you've got no chance. And then when you go in the hospital, they are, oh gosh, they're so bare. There's nothing. It's stark. It's scary.
It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. It really is. But we've started taking these nurses in. They are Mercy Hands, and they're doing an amazing job. They save lives when they were there, for sure. For sure. It's incredible. Yeah.
I'm so proud to know both you and Julie. I think you guys are incredible humans and definitely an inspiration to anyone out there. But what are your wildest dreams for Water for Africa? Where do you see it in 10 years?
More of what we're doing.
More avocados?
Well, maybe more avocados. But, we have, right now we have a team that works in Tanzania. So they go repairing wells, and then we drill wells as the funds come. We also have a team in Uganda, in Lira, which is doing the same thing. But we are scratching the surface. We want to do more and more and more. And, even with the seed program with the widows, we want to do more villages, because this thing actually starts to grow itself. When people are giving seed back, every year it grows. We started with 20, now we've got 60 women, and this will just keep growing every year. But the more implementations of it we can do, the more it will grow. So it's quite an organic thing. To take more doctors and nurses, maybe to build a clinic. One thing we saw that premature babies just die. There's no incubators, there's no oxygen, there's no anything. So how simple would it be to build a clinic and just have a little prem unit there for babies? It'd be a pretty simple thing, right? So we've got so many things in our minds that we want to do. We want to build this thing. We want to touch more regions. We want to touch more people.
How can anyone that's listening out there help Water for Africa?
www.waterforafrica.com.au. There are more than one Water for Africa, so we are the .com.au. Okay? If you go on the website, there are many ways to get involved. You can volunteer, you can give of your funds, you can give from $2, you can have your own well if you like, and we'll put a plaque on it and take a photograph. And we do run volunteer teams, so people can come and be involved. So I think if that's the go-to page, if you go to the website, and that's your starting point, really.
And how can people stay updated and in contact? Just get on your mailing list?
Sure. Again, on the website, get your name down, ask to be on the mailing list. We send newsletters out on a regular basis. We'll let you know what we're doing. We'll let you know what needs are if you want to get involved. So you can become an integral part of Water for Africa very simply.
As Phil, Julie and the team story continues, Water for Africa continues on their mission of clean water, sanitation and effective water management. In doing so, increasing access to safe drinking water, improved sanitation and hygiene, and better water management to reduce the risks of waterborne diseases and recreational accidents. What really stood out for me was just the power and the strength of Phil's personal story, where a moment of depression or a period of depression actually became the catalyst for him changing the course and the direction of his own life, for stepping out of the box, for saying yes to something that seemed completely remote and unknown to him, for grabbing a plane and just jumping on it and trying to figure out a new way to solve a problem that maybe seemed too complex for him. But look what he's done in the last 7 or 8 years. It's actually incredible, bringing 2.2 million people fresh drinking water just by saying yes. I think it's amazing. You can keep up to date with all the current projects by following @the official Water for Africa on Instagram and Facebook. And to play a part in bringing clean water to communities today, you can donate at waterforafrica.com.au/support-us. We've got an interesting lineup of guests coming up for our next few sessions, so make sure you stay connected. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest picture things that we're facing as a community and as individuals. So keep up to date by subscribing to The Difference podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you follow us at The Difference Org on Instagram, at The Difference_org on Twitter, and we are thedifference.org on Facebook. You can also visit our difference.org. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.